Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session on cloud debugging. My name is Haley, and I'm joined by our presenter, Phil Bratt. You are currently muted. There will be time for question and answers after Phil's presentation. In the meantime, you can post questions to the Q&A or chat areas on your screen. If you have tech issues, please contact classes@synergex.com, and they will help you. This session is being recorded, so you'll have access to it after the conference ends. Without further ado, let's get into it. I'm so pleased to introduce our presenter today, Phil Bratt. Phil joined the Synergy DE developer support team in 2014 after graduating with a degree in computer science. He has extensive knowledge of the Synergy DE product suite with specialties in .NET technologies and Synergy integration for Visual Studio support. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Phillip Bratt, and I work for Synergex in their development support engineer department. We do support calls to help out fellow developers with working through their problems. I've been working for Synergex for about 7 years, and I wanted to talk about a little bit about cloud debugging, something that I run into all the time. Now, the one issue that we always run into is that dreaded 3 a.m. phone call. Now, that 3 a.m. phone call, some of you might not be familiar with what I'm referring to. If you aren't, then I wish I was you. That such a blessing that must be, because for the 3 a.m. phone call for some of us, that is that experience where you get that call at the dead of the night and they're saying things like, "Okay, the system is down. That we can't find the problem. We don't know what's happening." The end users are very upset, and we're losing data by the minute. Just everything is going wrong, and we didn't know who to call. And so we're coming to you, we're asking you, can you help us? And you end up jumping onto whatever call, and there's either just you and some other guy there that's trying to fix things, or it's you and like everyone else at the company. We've all kind of been there, and you start running through a list of questions like, what do we do now? Who do we need? Who's in charge? How do we figure out what this problem is? And it usually devolves into a guessing game until someone finally gets it right, or the problem resolves itself mysteriously because it was some sort of weird time factor. Who knows? Like we've been there, and it's met with a variety of different kinds of takes, right? We have the people who are like a little bit panicky. We have the people who are trying to push everything through as fast as possible, and then we have the people that are just rolling their eyes because they've been here before, and they do that heavy sigh of the and because they've been here before. And now, of course, this is not a unique problem for just cloud computing. I did want to talk specifically, though, about the issues we run into with cloud debugging, because we end up with that layer of abstraction that causes us to have to rethink our strategies when it comes to product deployment, and it becomes a very unique way of doing things. Now, a lot of the stuff we'll be talking about could be applied to very general, everyday debugging techniques, but I'm going to keep this very specific to the cloud because I found that it comes with its own unique set of problems. And so the things I'm going to talk about is a little bit about our prevention, detection of the problems, debugging problems when they happen, and then reassessing and getting better. But first, I wanted to kind of paint a picture. Now, in our picture, we have this lovely bush. It's our little bush of code. And, we sit there and we do our coding and we trim that bush. And who am I kidding? We just let that bush get out of control because that's just our code bases, right? And so our bush makes our program, and our program gets deployed to the cloud here, right? So we have our Synergy applications being hosted in the cloud. It's nice and fluffy. It's a little gray, maybe going to storm, maybe some lightning, never know with these things. And so we have our code and we're pushing out updates to our cloud. And this is the pretty basic setup for most people. They have a way to push updates out to the cloud, do your deployment through whatever cloud service you're doing, and then they think nothing else of it. But what about those problems that are going to arise? How are we planning for them? What are we doing once they happen? Well, first, we're going to need a plan. So we have our sunny little plan here, right? And the plan here, puts its light across the entire painting here, our serene picture, and touches everything that we're going to need. Now, what's going to be in this plan? What is the sunlight penetrating going to do for our picture here? Well, the first thing our plan is going to need is we're going to need something that if an update goes wrong, right? How are we going to do something like a rollback? So we have our rollback, it's up there in the cloud. So then if our updates are our evaporation going into our cloud, because I'm trying to keep this metaphor going as long as possible, we end up with that rollback that we might need to do. And so we've got our rollback in place and it's part of our plan. Next part of our plan is, well, what if the issue only happened in the cloud? How do we debug it there? Well, we have to also plan for our debugger. And our debugger starts down at the ground because it's in there with our code and our little bush, and it's happy. And I've put acorns on it for flavor. Of course, you got your modules and stuff sticking to your debugger. And then like your linked libraries. And then the debugger stretches up to the sky to access our cloud. And of course, we've cultivated this tree. We've made our tool set, in order to make it work with our cloud. And of course, then we're going to need someone to be able to respond. Part of our plan is going to need to be someone to respond to the plan and be able to know the plan and to carry it out. That part of who's in charge, who's going to be doing this. And so, of course, I picked a bear for our response team because bears are famously known for being happy to be there all the time. And so just like our response team, they are just happy to be on scene. So now we have our serene picture here that I've painted with the best I could find of PowerPoint shapes in order to kind of show this scene of how it's going to look. At first we just had our cloud and our code and we're putting our updates, but now that we've got a plan in place, we have more assurance that things are going to go the way we want to. Even if something goes wrong, we can anticipate that and we can fix it. And so let's kind of go over how we can get to this point, this serene picture of updates. So let's kind of talk about what the problem is, right? So we've got something that happens that's been happening since any updates. It's, like I said, it's not unique to the cloud, but it is unique with the cloud experience. And so what we're going to be talking about is first preparation. This is going to be the majority of the work. In order to get to that picture there's a lot of preparation that we need to do. There's a lot of steps we have to take in order to, when game time happens, we're able to just jump in there, do what we need to, fix it, roll it back, do whatever we need to, and be able to recover. And so we're going to talk about all the preparation that's going to be needed. Then we're going to talk about the actual time when we're there in order to fix the issue. And then, of course, we're going to talk about what we do afterwards, the evaluation, the post-mortem, the whatever you want to call it, about working with and making our process better. So what we're not going to be talking about. Well, I'm not going to be talking about which specific tools you should be using. I'm going to give situations and the kind of tools that you could be looking for, but I'm not going to give a very specific tool because, like the second part here, scenarios are going to be very specific to your individual configuration. So we're not going to be talking about a specific scenario, whether it's a cloud-based application or a application that uses the cloud in order to grow and goes into various apps and APIs and that kind of stuff. We're going to just talk about a very broad sense of you have an application that is in the cloud somewhere. And what do you do if there's issues there? So that's kind of what we're going to do. Let's kind of talk about this, our past, what we can do to prepare, our present, what we're going to do when the thing happens, and then the future of how we're going to plan afterward. Starting with the past, we want to make a plan. And so our planning phase is how we get ready for the big game time, for when things go wrong. We're ready, we're in place, we know who's need to be there. We've done everything we can to prevent these kind of things from happening through our planning. We are able to detect problems, and then we're also able to mitigate problems when they do happen, and so they don't affect quite a large variety of people. And so we're going to talk about our checklist. Right now you have your checklist probably for pushing out something, and you should also have your checklist for what happens if something goes wrong. And so we're going to kind of talk about that. And then, of course, we have our pre-mortem. So when we're making our plan, then a good thing to do is to have a sit down with everyone, have a session about what we do let's assume that we're at the end of our launch is successful, but everything went wrong. Now, this is a great part for making the plan, because at this point you can talk about, well, let's assume everything went wrong. What kind of things could have gone wrong? What kind of things could we have made? What kind of things can we have prevented? And we're going to talk about breaking those things down. Maybe we didn't test enough. Maybe we just didn't detect the problem before it was a big issue. Or maybe it just affected too many people and we weren't able to respond. And these are the kind of things that we're going to talk about that you can address and that you should be thinking about when you're planning out your launch. So let's first talk about testing. So with testing, you have your scalability. These are the kind of things that you have to start considering, because when it comes to testing, we're trying to be in the business of prevention. And so whether it's a fresh launch or an update, a cloud-specific launch has us reprioritize and add some new levels to our testing. And so with scalability, we're testing not only the system's ability to do one user, but many users, and grow with that work. And so you have multiple users coming on. How do you deal with that? And then performance comes even more to the forefront here, because with performance, it's how did the individual performance work on the system? And it becomes even more important, because when things start slowing down, it has a knock-on effect with your scalability, and this all kind of runs into each other. And then of course security, we have our things in the cloud. It's not a secure on-site server that we can do stuff to prevent access from. And so our security becomes a little different. We have to start thinking about that from a testing perspective, testing for our security from not just our launch, but every single update. What are we going to do to make sure that we prevent situations such as who's able to access the app? Are we running into, are we doing our compliance with what we've agreed in the contract? And of course, are we not accidentally exposing data that shouldn't be exposed inside of our application? These kind of things, work with current desktop apps or anything like that, but with cloud applications, it becomes a whole different kind of ball game there. So, and then of course, reliability. We're adding that extra layer of abstraction there. And so with our reliability, we want to make sure that with bad connections, overload on the system, that our data is not getting corrupted, that it's staying the way it should, and that it's still available even through multiple method calls of the same thing. The data is still available. Now, for on-premise testing, it becomes a little problematic here because we're in the cloud. And so budget becomes an issue. Geographic, your users, and one of the big things of putting applications in the cloud is so then you can have more users geographically accessing it at the same time. And so with cloud hosting, you do get stuff like usually the situation is you're paying for what you use. And so price becomes a problem, because with stress testing, you don't want to overload the system and end up paying a bunch of money for using up that cloud space. And so what are some of the things that we need to consider and do? Well, there's emulator testing. So we emulate the issues that can happen. And we have certain aspects that we can use through emulator testing, such as dynamic scaling. Or automated provisioning, which is basically making a set of procedures that a user would step through inside of our application, but being able to automate that so that instead of having users going through and doing that, we're able to automate that, and then we're able to scale it and work that together. And then, of course, synchronize all of our tests together to run them in that emulator. Can all be done with our emulator testing to really work things out. Now, there is a step we need to consider beforehand, which is our unit testing. If you're not already doing it, unit testing is a great way to put all of your testing in neat little packages, so then you can automate them and use them inside of your emulator more effectively in testing your code base and that kind of stuff. And this is a great way to get there as a first step. And then, of course, we have our stress testing, which is what comes more into our emulator testing is doing. And so we have stress testing, we have load testing, which is testing that scalability. We're loading a bunch of users into there and making them do things. And then, of course, there's latency testing, because now we're online and we have to test whether things are going slow. Is that going to cause any issues? Is that problems for our data? And then, of course, failover testing. If everything fails over, If we have things failing, how do we recover from that and that kind of stuff, which is great for anticipating and preventing issues before they happen as well. And then, of course, our last kind of test we have to worry about is imitating that live upgrade. How do we go into that live upgrade, test it, and make sure that it's going to work? And so, and then likewise, testing our rollback as well, all part of that package of testing our application and that kind of stuff, which becomes very important for deploying to the cloud, because you get that one shot, it gets deployed to the cloud, and then it hits your user base. We want to make sure that that process works and is going to work with each upgrade. And so let's talk a little bit about the disaster recovery plan. This is the who's who and who's going to do what, and making our metrics for what's acceptable for our downtime. This is very important to have and very important to lay out for our group, for the response team and everyone involved, so they know what the plan is. So first you have your recovery point objectives. Now this is in the plan, this is measured by the acceptable amount of time that can be lost before data loss becomes unacceptable. How long can you be down and losing data? How much data can you lose per disaster that's acceptable? And then you have to work and make sure that your planning goes and meets those objectives. And likewise with recovery time objectives, this is how long you can be down before something bad happens, like before you cause any permanent damage. What is your parameters for that? How long can something be down? This is also very good for maintenance, that kind of stuff, like how long can that system be down? For the next ones, I want to talk about them and break them down individually, starting with the remote data backups, then our accountability of the who's who, and then our testing the plan. So with the remote data backups, so we want to be able to back up our data regularly. The question is, how regular, what we're backing up, and that kind of stuff, and that should be in your plan. And then, of course, with Synergy, specifically, you've got some tools to help you with backing up your data. We have SynBackup, which I put a couple of links here with a video and that kind of to kind of give you a little more information on that. But just know that this is a tool that you can use to set, so then it ensures that the integrity of your data is intact for when you're doing those backups, so it doesn't cause an issue when you need to recall those, if you ever need to recall and recover from a backup. And then, of course, I do encourage, looking at the latest DBMS tools for Synergy, having your ISIM files up to Rev 6 for the performance enhancements, putting resilience so you can do live file maintenance and that kind of stuff, for keeping those indexes in sync with the data. And of course, the new features you have with ISUtil, all available within Synergy 11. So it's really great when you're talking about remote data backups to have those tools in place. Now for accountability, this is going to be our accountability chart. This is the who's going to be on the call, who do we need, who's on the response team, who needs to know about the plan. And usually it turns into everyone needs to know about the plan. And so we have to talk about who has access to what, who has permissions to what things, who's got the keys to the kingdom, right? Like who can get into what, who do we need on the call, what kind of knowledge do we need? And of course, who knows the system the best, who knows what's been happening. You should have at least one person on this team that knows everything that's been happening to that system, any of the updates, any time it's been down, someone who's been monitoring the system and can answer, what's changed, why has something started to occur now. Those people should be in your plan, and then you should train them on the plan. They should be a part of the plan. They probably even have input on your plan. And so everyone should, who's going to be in the plan, anyone mentioned in the plan, any position mentioned in the plan, should have training on how that plan goes. And then once you're all trained on the plan, then you need to test the plan. So this is going through your disaster recovery process. Running through it, remember that you have to take into consideration time, resources, and of course, planning it out so that it works with everyone, but you should test your plan. And it's great once you go into the evaluation stage to kind of see what kind of problems you'll run into. And so the kind of problems you might run into is, well, turns out so-and-so was out today, and so we weren't able to access this server because they're the only ones who know the password. Well, that's a problem that can shake out from that plan. Then you can say, well, we had this part of the process and no one knows how to do that. And so you can start saying, oh, it looks like we need to bring in more people on the plan. We need to cross-train people on how to do things in case things go bad. And then we can improve on that later and test the plan out again. And so that's a little bit about how you should have that disaster recovery plan in order to be able to respond with that, who's going to be on this call and who's on the response team. So now let's talk a little bit about knowing when a problem is occurring. And so I kind of wanted to go over a little bit about detecting that disaster from happening so you know when to jump into place. And we'll talk about 3 different things. We'll talk about logs, error reporting, and performance monitoring. So for logs, there's a variety, many of logs. And the general theme here is whenever a problem goes, every time there's a problem, someone's going to be asking, where are the logs? And so the kind of logs you should be considering if you're connecting to a database, then do you have the database logs? Because if there's an issue with the database, if there's an issue with the software maintaining your database, the first thing they're going to ask for is, where are the logs? For IO logs, consider, you can do some of this on your own. This might be automated for any interactions with files or any sort of IO. If you have any sort of files that are, we have we said database, but you have your ISM files or you just got flat files and that kind of stuff. Someone's going to ask, well, this thing got corrupted. How did that happen? Where are the logs, right? Then you have your APIs. These are, things you're using, going through different layers, different technologies even, or, using third-party software. Well, the first thing that's going to happen if they have a problem is they're going to say, okay, where's the log so we can see what happened? And then, of course, now that you're in the cloud, there's going to be ways to log what's happening in the cloud. And of course, there's no problem with making your own logs so that you can react to them, see what's going on within your own application, have some sort of log for error reporting. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. So, segue, error reporting. So, with error reporting, there is 2 factors we have to talk about here. And so we have scale versus severity. So imagine that you have a forest fire and it's happening somewhere and you've got yourself a vantage point and you're trying to find where the fire is, and then you have to see how widespread it is. How big is the fire? And so those are the kind of things we have to consider when we're talking about error reporting and making effective error reporting. When you start launching your application, when you do your launch and it starts affecting your users, you should have some sort of system to see, all right, so is this just affecting one user on one system? Is it affecting everyone? Is it blocking everyone out? Or is there an easy workaround? Those are the kind of things we're talking about with scale versus severity. Like, how bad is it and how many people is it affecting? Because some of those things might just be noise. And so we want to filter that out until and identify when we actually have to respond to something. And with this, we should be able to find, what's going on before even anyone else knows that something bad is happening. You're able to respond to that. And so if you have some sort of error reporting service, or you want to just be sending this out to a file, if you want to be sending it out via just some sort of web service or whatever, there's always that. And of course, I'm not going to name anything specifically, but there is software available for error reporting services as well. And so we talked about errors. Well, we're also doing all this testing around performance and scalability. Well, how do we know there's an issue with our performance and scalability once our launch has happened? Well, we wanted to consider a couple of things when it comes to performance monitoring. We have the transaction level, like per transaction, how long are things taking? And then we have our usage, our database, our web service, our caching, our memory, our CPU memory, like everything that's being used, how much is that being used? And so we can kind of see things early and detect them before it becomes an actual issue, because we're monitoring that performance. And of course, there's also network performance. These are usually called NPMs that monitor network delays and the such. And so you can get down to the network level on there as well when it comes to performance monitoring. And of course, that's kind of unique to web applications or cloud-based applications, of course. And so let's kind of bring that all together when it comes to detection. We kind of want to use all these elements to build our early detection system with our error reporting and our performance and our log management. We want to put those all into a way that we can kind of detect if something is going wrong before even the user knows something's going wrong. Because when the user's calling in, you should have known about what was happening an hour in advance, right? And so there are certain tools, once again, not going to name anything specifically, but they're APM tools. These are just like your early warning systems where you can be gathering your logs and your performance, your the health of your application out there, and of course watching for errors that are occurring and looking at the scale versus severity and putting those all together into an into a UI or something that you can use the breakdown to detect easily if something's happening and alert those who need to be alerted. So fires happen. But how do we get it so we're able to separate the forest? So if a fire does happen, it doesn't burn down the whole forest, and then we can't respond, right? So there's some things, some techniques we can do, like a staggered update. Now, what this is talking about is we have a group of our group of users or end users, whoever we're pushing our application out to. Is there ways that we can do to push it out to some of them at a time? So then, if there is an issue, then the update doesn't affect everyone at once. And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the staggered update. And then, of course, our responsive rollback. So we've pushed it out to group A, there's a problem, we roll it back. We push it out to group A and then group B, everything's going fine, but then an issue happens in group C, we're able to roll it back from there. And you have to have that system in place, all of that being planning ahead of time to be able to do a rollback when you need to, all part of your schedule. And so you're able to schedule that out and be able to assess things before they happen. And so this is all stuff we should be doing in order to mitigate the issues at the time of when bad stuff happens. So a good way of being able to kind of separate out your groups without making it so that you're just not, because we're talking about cloud here. So you push it out to the cloud, but then everyone has access to it. How are we able to kind of keep those groups separated? Well, there is a technique we can use called feature flags. Now with feature flags, this is kind of an on-off without doing your without your deployment. So what we're talking about here is we talk about in Synergy, this is as simple as maybe just getting a logical or checking for the existence of a file or whatever external factor that you can have to control to say, hey, this section of code only gets run if this external factor is in effect. And this way, we're able to toggle our features on and off like a flag. And so then you can do stuff like test it in production, turn on the flag, see what's going on, turn it back off. And then, of course, we can also, with our deployment, this is how we can segment groups, because then we can have one group with we have two groups with the same code base. One of them has the feature turned on, one of them has the feature turned off, and we're able to just toggle those back on and off. And so then we can push out an update in what's called a dark launch, which is basically where we have the feature turned off already, and then we send out that code base to the program, and that feature's turned off, right? And so the code is there, but is not doing anything, and then we can turn it on as we want to in a slow, methodical process or however we want. Now, there is also, once again, I'm not going to name anything specific, but there is software available to keep track of your features with feature flags and that kind of stuff in your API. And so these are great things. It's a great little coding tool that you can use. It's very simple. It's just an if statement to use, and it's a great way to do your tests live, so to speak, so that you can kind of toggle features on and off and have it run code or not run code. Great for new features, right? And so now let's kind of talk about putting that plan into action. So now we've gone into our present. Let's say that we've pushed out a update, we've done our launch, or we pushed out our product and something's gone wrong. So now that we've done all that planning, what do we do on the actual event of the problem? And so first we're going to talk about the rollback. So the rollback is the process we're going to go through in order to undo the changes that we just made to the system. And so the first thing that's very important with this is to write out what the rollback looks like and make this a step-by-step instruction. Usually if you can automate it, and then of course test it. The rollback testing should be part of your whole launch plan when you're going to launch something, how to launch it and then unlaunch it. So step-by-step instructions, whoever is going to be performing the rollback should, one, know that they're going to be performing the rollback. That would be good. And then, of course, they should know what the rollback procedures are, and they should be able to find them if they need a refresher. There should be something that's part of the plans, part of the process, and everyone knows where it's at. And then, of course, test it. Just make sure that your rollback is working, because when it comes time to do that, any second down is bad, and so rolling back is a great fast tool for just undoing a update and saying, hey, we'll go and look at this later, and then we'll do our update later. So next one is, okay, let's say that the problem's happening, but it's only happening on the cloud, and we just need to get in there. We need to figure out what's going wrong. Well, we have our remote debugging tools. And so what we need is a lot of work ahead of time, because one of the biggest things when it comes to remote debugging is you need a way in. You need to have that plan. You need to have some sort of way that you're going to be accessing the code base with symbols if you need to, how you're going to be able to get in there. Very useful to be able to use a debugger to get a dump file or anything of that sort in order to get your symbols there, so then you can look and walk through it. Also very important during the remote debugging phase is when everyone gets on there to know what changed, because then you can narrow down what exactly you're going to be looking for. And so with the remote debugging, the best thing to do is to test it, how you're going to get a way in, test your way in, test running things through the debugger on the cloud, because I guarantee that just because your developer knows how to debug on their own system doesn't mean they know how to debug on the cloud. So training, if you need to, know who's trained, who's going to be doing what, and have those tools. Because sometimes the best you can do is just testing pushes, testing transactions if it's like a web-based application. Sometimes you might be able to get in there and test out the whole thing with a debugger attached, which is great as well. But you need to have that prepared ahead of time and have a system in place so you can switch everything over to a debug-like style. And then the last one, data recovery. And so let's say that something has gone wrong, data has been lost to the point where maybe we're exceeding the amount of data that's acceptable to be lost, and data's lost and it's it doesn't have that same integrity, so we need to go to a backup. And so that's why data recovery should be written out. Once again, this is a thing that should be planned ahead of time, but then something you can do on the time when something bad happens. You can go back and recover those tools. Now, of course, if you're looking at data and you don't want to go straight into your data backups, there are some utilities available through the DBMS utilities to do on the fly to kind of recover files, specifically ISIM files, at the time of when the problem happens. And so we have isutil. This is able to look and see if there's problems with your ISIM file directly. You can verify, you can rebuild the index if you need to, if there's issues with your index specifically. IPAR, I love this tool specifically for trying to figure out, like, maybe there was an issue with the update, like you pushed out something that doesn't match the definitions, or something that doesn't match the data layout. You can take a quick look at data layout on a live system and see if it matches what's going on with the runtime, how you're trying to treat that data. Because I've run into that so many times where it's just, hey, we forgot to push out the repository. We forgot to push out the new ISIM data layout for the new ISIM files and that kind of stuff. We have the wrong definitions at some point. And so this is a great tool to kind of detect that early. First thing you do on the call and be like, oh, it's this. And it makes it so much easier. And of course, when you're going into your data backups, we do have a great section on Synergex.com for disaster recovery. Be sure to look through that, and kind of our whole spiel on disaster recovery plans. Be sure to be referring to your disaster recovery plan, because if you're doing what I talked about in the planning phase, then you've already got that ready to go and you're good to go from there to execute that. And so it becomes quick. As you can see, we're kind of getting to that picture where, hey, we're ready to go. We know who's supposed to be here. We know who knows what and who is able to do what. And then we're able to quickly get on, either roll back the system, debug the problem, look at the data, fix whatever we need to, and get out as quickly as possible in order to get things up and running to keep everything within our allotted time limits within our disaster recovery plan. So it's all starting to come together. So let's start talking about what if we do all that and it didn't work out. So this is a process. Your disaster recovery plan should be a living document type of thing, always getting improvements. And how do we do those improvements? Well, we have our post-op learning or opportunity to kind of look at how things went. And you should be having these whenever there's any sort of disaster. You kind of look through what happened, what we could have done to prevent it from happening. What kind of things do we need to change in the process to be faster, more efficient next time? Where do we see the holes in our operation? Even if it's, nothing we could have done to prevent it or nothing we could have done to, we did a pretty good job. Well, how can we make it faster, right? And so the big focus here, of course, with the postmortem is going to be focusing on process, not exactly the people. We're not looking at individuals unless it comes to a training process, like an individual didn't know something. Well, that's a training issue. We're going to be focusing on the process because what we want is we want the process to work. And so then we can plan for the future. And it becomes an iterative process where we make the plans, we execute the plans. And when the plans are executed, we look back at the plans and we said, was that a good plan? How can we do better? What can we do better? And make those very specific goals there. And so a little bit more on the postmortem. Once again, we're reviewing the process, identify which processes they were, which ones broke down, because it's not usually the whole, let's throw out the whole plan. Identify specifically when you're looking at it, which processes, which part of those plans could we have improved on? And of course, is it a product of the process that is breaking down, or was it a breakdown of the process? Were things not working the way the process had them outlined, or was it the process itself needs improvements? These are very specific differences between how these two work. And so we want to make sure we are identifying them specifically for if it's a product of the process or just the process wasn't executed the way it was supposed to. And so once we've done that, then we can start planning for our future. We can start to, by adapting, this is our first knee-jerk reaction. How are we going to get this done now? And so then we can plan for it and be ready for it. And then, of course, how are we going to be doing this in the future? Think about practicality when it comes to this, of course. And then, of course, what can we automate? This should be the top of everyone's minds. Once we adapt those processes, well, what can we automate from this process? What kind of things can we do without needing to have someone there so it can respond quicker? How do we just launch that process to be gone through in an automated way? Because a lot of this, like the rollback and that kind of stuff, could be subject to automation. It's just looking for those procedures and those steps. And then, of course, how can we do it faster? Try to accelerate the processes. How can we respond faster? How can we detect faster? How can we prevent this from happening at a better rate with better testing? All those things we talked about in the pre-mortem, things that could have gone wrong. Well, if those things do go wrong, then how can we improve on those? It's usually the same list of questions of the kind of stuff we talked about here, and getting place in order to get that serene picture of having a great response to our cloud debugging issues. Now, when considering your plan and all these processes and everything that's going into place, there are things available to you to help you kind of get there, or to maybe improve on your processes now, or something I said in there that you're like, wait a minute, how do we even get that started? Who do we need? What kind of skills do we need for that? And of course, we always have the Synergex Professional Services group. We're here to help you with these processes. If you have questions, we of course can help you with consultations or on-site helping you plan these out, because a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, we had to do for ourselves as well. And so we have experience in doing this, and we're more than happy to help you with your project or anything like that if you need some extra manpower, because maybe you're saying things like, I just don't have enough time to make a plan. I don't have the the resources to make a plan. I don't even know like who's needed for this plan. I don't know if I have someone here to do X thing for us in order to do that part of the plan. Well, we can help you with that, because remember that some of this part can be automated. Some of this part maybe doesn't apply to you. And of course, we can help you identify those opportunities and that kind of stuff. And so, reach out to us. We do have our consulting available. And of course, I should plug in our Synergy support services that we also have. That I'm a part of. You can always say, hey, I've got some Synergex related questions with this thing, and how it can handle these certain scenarios. Like if we're having issues with that kind of stuff and concerns. And then, of course, we might be directing you to PSG. There might be something we can direct you for, maybe an improvement in the product and that kind of stuff. We're available for this as well. To help you with this process, because it can be a daunting task, especially if you're starting from just that very basic. Well, we have our code and we're just pushing updates to our cloud-based application, and then when bad things happen, we sigh because it's happening again. So we have resources available to help you with that. And so let's just kind of break down what we've talked about here. So with the pre-planning, this is the majority of the stuff you're doing, because when you're thinking about the big debugging session in the cloud, a lot of that happens beforehand, making sure that our debugging tools are going to work, what debugging tools we're going to use, all part of our plan that we've laid out for if disaster happens. And of course, putting in our detection so we know that a problem is happening, and then we can maybe fix it before it becomes an issue. So then we can keep within those parameters of our disaster recovery plan. And then on game day, when we do a rollout, and if something should happen, that we're able to respond to it in a quick manner and as fast as we can in order to resolve it before it becomes an issue. Especially if we're able to detect it in an earlier group that something is amiss, then we're able to mitigate those problems with less resources than we normally would have had in those kind of things, as long as we were planning it out ahead of time. And then, of course, in the end, we need to sit down and we need to think about what went wrong, what could have gone better, what can we improve on, and then use those resources and time to improve on those methods. So then once it's in place, it can keep rolling, it can keep evolving until you have a place where you have that serene picture where you're pushing out an update. You're not too worried because the response team is in place. That your tree of a debugger is up there reaching up to the cloud in order to get access, so you can get rid of any bugs that happen inside of the cloud, because you've tested and you've got confidence that everything's going to be working, and it's just that nice sunny day with slightly stormy clouds. So with that, who has the first question?
So we do have a couple of questions, and the first one is, what if we are a small operation? Should I still do any of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with the plan, not all the steps are always completely necessary. One important thing is to just figure out what works for you, because no one knows your application like you do. And so really the biggest part is identifying your critical factors. What is important to you, and really, like, at the minimum, having that disaster recovery plan is key, and it kind of builds around there, because that kind of helps you with the scale of how much you need to do. And so even if it's a small operation, there's still a lot in there stepwise that you could be doing to get that to work out. It's all about what is important to you, and where are your factors. So
Thanks, Phil. Awesome. All right, another question coming from Tim Laverne. He says, can you comment on how this dovetails with DevOps?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question, Tim. So with DevOps, a lot of this comes into play. I didn't really discuss a lot on the DevOps, so I'm glad you brought that up, because with the DevOps, that really helps with the planning phase, right? Because you're talking about your deployment and you're talking about prevention. And so when we're talking about testing and your builds and that kind of stuff, a lot of that happens in your DevOps like section of how that's going to work, because the whole idea with DevOps is you have your development and your operations working together, and so it creates that literal pipeline to the cloud. And so all of that stuff, if it's in place, makes the rest of it a lot easier to manage and to work with that. And there's a lot of great DevOps tools and that kind of thing that you can use in place there. But yeah, DevOps is definitely a great step in getting that to be more responsive, especially when it comes to testing, prevention, and of course, like knowing, like putting into place like where you can put in those points where you can be adaptive, since you're now covering the entire process.
Thanks, Phil. Our next question is, it was mentioned that there's software for some of these processes. What software should I look for?
Yeah. So with this kind of stuff, it depends on what, once again, with your scale, like what you're going to be looking for. But definitely an APM tool. If you just Google some popular, like the application performance management, that's those kind of tools and that kind of stuff. There's stuff like Stackify or App Dynamics that will help you. The whole purpose of this is what you're looking for is they all kind of cover a different range of what you're going to be doing. Some are more focused on other things and different areas. And so really it's like, what is your criteria you're going to be looking for there? Because you're and that's kind of help you shop around for what you're looking for. And of course, there's the NPM that I mentioned. Those are your network performance measures, and really good. And it really depends on who's going to be looking at this as well, who's going to be digesting this, because there's different kind of levels of GUI and that kind of stuff. Like how high a level do you want this? And of course, as Tim mentioned with DevOps, there's also a lot that work with the Microsoft DevOps tools. And there's a lot that plug into there. And so if that's something you're using or something you're looking into, I would definitely recommend looking into things that can plug into your Microsoft DevOps. So
Awesome. Thank you, Phil.
yeah.
It looks like we have one more question. If anyone else has any other questions, last call to get them in. But last question for now, at least, is what if we have a plan and we're still scrambling for solutions when a problem happens?
Yeah, this is actually pretty common. It's I think what this really comes down into is that when you're assessing these kind of things, just remember to put a priority um, onto your development tools and your performance tools and anything to help you get there. That's why I find a lot of people miss the pre-planning a launch phase, or they're missing the post-operation phase where they're taking a look at what they're doing and how to assess that. Because I know for a lot of the calls that I've taken from support, the biggest step that we had towards learning and towards getting better is always just sitting down with everyone involved in the operation, saying, "Hey, how could we have done this better? What can we improve on?" And a lot of times, if you keep it as an open discussion, you'll find a lot of things that even weren't even related to the latest problem that could help you reassess and readjust and reprioritize things to make it better in the long run. So yeah, it's all great. I figure we don't have a lot of questions because I'm everyone knows where to find me in support. So
Absolutely. Well, yeah, Phil, wonderful, wonderful presentation today. Thank you very much for that. And a pleasure to work with you. Synergex is very lucky to have you. So for our audience out there, thank you for being here today, starting off week 2 of the conference. We'll hope to see you tomorrow for case studies in modern development practices on non-Windows deployment systems and DevOps and Synergy development. Oh, a late question from Marty Lewis from in the audience. Can I make Synergex support part of my plan?
well, I mean, I hope you do consider us as some of the resources when you're looking at the looking at your plan. Know that we are available. In terms of your back end prevention and the process. We also do have plugin PSG once again, because they consultants, they've gone through a lot of this and they can help with a lot of that. But don't I would say don't use this as a crutch, but we are definitely available, and I'm more than happy to jump in there with you on um, some of those calls. I've been on them before, and we'll do what we can. But just know that you know your application best, and that because you know the application, you know where things can fall down, and to rely on that and to help us focus. Because I mean, we're there to help as much as we can. And so, yeah, Marty, include us in the plan, but there's also development and those kind of tools available, right? So